Hi everyone, welcome to Javaras. Let's look at few of the best practices while implementing OAuth2 solutions. The first of all, you need to understand the basics of OAuth2. You need to understand what are the roles in OAuth2. For example, OAuth server, client application, resource or API server, and the resource owner. And you need to understand the interaction between different parties of the OAuth2. For example, what is the authorization request? What is the content of the authorization request? And what we get back in authorization request callback and how to handle it. And you need to understand what is inside token request. That means what are all the query parameters inside token request, and how client sends the access token to the resource server while making any API request. You don't need to know how all these things works, how these things are implemented, because you will obviously use libraries for that, but you need to understand the interaction, like what goes in the request, what comes back in the response. You may get away without understanding the basics of auth 2. You can use any library and everything is working, but let's say you get some error in auth 2 library or somewhere else, and then you need to debug. So if you know basics, then it is very easy to debug, otherwise you need to struggle a lot. Then you need to understand the security measures taken while implementing OAuth 2. So one of them is state parameter in the authorization request and proof key for code exchange or PKCE. Then you need to understand OAuth 2 grant type so that you can choose the correct grant type for your use case. The first is authorization code grant, which is recommended whenever a user is involved. So that means if any user needs to authenticate to the authorization server, and that access token is used by your application, then authorization code grant flow is recommended. Then there is implicit grant. So this is used by single page applications, but this is not recommended. In this flow, we directly get the access token without getting the authorization code. Then there is client credential grant. So if you have a use case to communicate from machine to machine, so let's say access token is not for any particular user, but it is for your client application. In that case, you need to use client credential grant. Then there is resource owner password credential grant, which you need to avoid, because in this grant, client application needs to store users username and password and then send them to the authorization server, which is not ideal. You need to understand the basics of PKCE. This is highly recommended for mobile and single page applications, but it is advised to use it for confidential clients as well. And you need to understand how it prevents code interception attack. Then regarding redirect URIs as well, you need to make them secure. So for that, first of all, use exact match validation. That means if you want to register your client application to authorization server, then use the exact redirect URI. Not don't don't put any wild card or some regular expression matching in the redirect URI. And also use HTTPS URI to secure data transmission. For example, this is a perfectly secure redirect URI, but this is not, because here we are using wildcard. And in the third request, we are using HTTP, not HTTPS. So the data transmission will not be secure from the client to authorization server to client, or anything. And also in the fourth URL as well, we are using wildcard. So don't use wildcards in your redirect URI. Then regarding tokens, you need to use short-lived access token. So let's say you are building client application, and while registering the client application, if you get the option to specify the lifetime of access token, then use short lifetime. Or if you are building authorization server and you have the option to specify the lifetime of access token, then use short-lived access tokens. And use refresh token in order to refresh the access tokens, but you need to store refresh tokens securely, and you need to rotate them frequently. That means you need to expire your refresh token as well, not shortly after issuing them, but let's say after 1 day or 2 days, something like that. Then you need to have a mechanism to revoke the access tokens. Let's say some access tokens have been compromised, then you should have the mechanism to revoke them, and you need to enable users to revoke the tokens. This is particularly useful if you are building OAuth2 authorization server. In that case, you want to tell the users which all client applications have the access token on behalf of them, so that they can go to that page and then they can revoke the access for some applications which they are not using. Then you need to use scopes and least privilege principle to restrict the access. So least privilege means, let's say your application wants to perform some actions, then only include those actions or those scopes in the authorization request, nothing else. So only include necessary scopes only in authorization request, and tell user about the scope. So in the authorization page, user should be able to see clearly what all permissions they are trying to give to the application. About client secrets, you need to store them securely and never store them in the source code. And obviously, client secrets are valid for confidential clients only. And for different environments, use different secrets. So if, let's say, for development, staging, and production, let's say your client secret for development has been leaked, then it will not impact staging or production. Now, regarding OpenID Connect protocol, you need to understand the difference between OAuth2 and OpenID Connect. This is basically difference between authentication and authorization. You need to know where to use ID token and where to use access token. If you can integrate multi-factor authentication flow, so let's say you are creating an OAuth2 client application, and while registering client application to the authorization server, if you get the option to enable the multi-factor authentication, then please enable it. And this is highly recommended for high risk operations. And this acts as an extra layer of security. And if you are building OAuth2 authorization server, then obviously you must give the clients the choice to enable multi-factor authentication. Now let's see some of the best practices while creating OAuth2 client application. First of all, always try to use confidential client if you can. But if you need to use public client means single page applications or mobile devices. In that case, don't use client secret. So while registering your application on the authorization server, you may get the option to choose the type of client. So that choose the type of client is public. So the authorization server will not give you the client secret. If you are building authorization server, then in case of public client, don't issue client secret. If you can, then try to serve your single page application using backend. In that case, you can treat it as a confidential client. If you want to see how to do that, then you can watch this video here. So this playlist. So this playlist is about securing single page applications with Spring Security. So here we are serving Angular application using Spring Boot backend. So in that case, we can treat the single page application as confidential client, because we will not store anything in the JavaScript. We will store everything in the Spring Boot side. That means on the server. Then don't reinvent the wheel. That means don't write the code for OAuth2 client by your hand. Use secure and well-tested libraries. If you are using Spring Framework, then there is OAuth2 client library for Spring. If you are using Angular, if you are creating single page application using Angular, you are not serving it from backend. It is purely on client side. Then you can use Angular OAuth client library on npm. There are many more. You can use whatever you want. And let's say you are creating Android apps, then there is this package on GitHub. You can use that. And there may be some additional things as well. I don't know much about it, but yeah, don't write anything by yourself. Always use a secure and well tested library. Same thing goes for the auth2 resource server as well. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use the libraries. If you are using Spring and you want to create resource server, then there is OAuth2 resource server library. You can use that. I have created this video as well. You can watch it. Welcome everyone. So here we create resource server. While building authorization server, don't create your own. So if you can, then try to use, let's say, Google, Facebook, GitHub, these identity providers to authenticate and authorize your users. And there are some other authorization servers like Okta and Auth0. Their main like business is providing authorization server. And the nice thing about them is you can they act as Auth2 client as well. That means you can integrate different authorization servers as well. For example, inside Okta, you can connect it to Google, Facebook, and GitHub. So whenever users see that Okta login page, then there they will get the option to login with, let's say, Google, Facebook, and GitHub as well. Let's say you don't want to use any service, but you want to have full control on your authorization server, then you can deploy your own server. For that, you can go to Keycloak. So there may be more, but I know about Keycloak. So you can go here, click on get started. So these are like, there are many ways by which you can deploy your Keycloak. So you can directly download the jar file and then run it, or you can run it in Docker, you can run it in Kubernetes. So there are many things, and it has a great documentation as well. So by that way, the authorization server will be all yours, and you can do whatever you want with it. But let's say you want to create your own, so you want to write some code. Not recommended, but let's say you want to do that. And let's say you are using Spring. In that case, there is Spring Authorization Server library, which is a great library. I have even created a video here. Hi everyone, so welcome to Java. In this video, we create authorization server using Spring Authorization Server library. That was it. Thank you everyone for watching the video. If you find this video to be useful, then please like and share it. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will see you in the next video.